pulls on a megaphone from his vehicle, and he steps in front of his police line, and he yells over the demonstrators, "Uno momento, por favor! Uno turista para Ecuador!" And I'm kind of going, no. And they stop. They stop throwing rocks. They stop throwing the Molotov cocktails. And he turns back to me and he says, "Senor." So I pick up my backpack and I kind of go, "You sure?" And he goes, "Yeah." So I start walking. The policemen are kind of patting me on the back. "How you doing?" And I have to walk through no man's land. I'm dodging these burning Molotov cocktails, and and.
Welcome to El Cafecito Travel Talks with Tony Lloyd. Each episode, Tony sits down with travelers, expats, creatives, and community voices from across Latin America and beyond, sharing stories of travel, culture, connection, and the journeys that shape us. So grab a cafecito or a tea and enjoy the conversation.
Would you like to introduce yourself?
Just call me Ken.
Just call me Ken. Okay, Ken.
Kind of like the movie, yeah?
Okay, we'll go with that. Tell me whatever you'd like people to know about your backstory, where you're from, where you consider home, what do you...
It's complicated, but yeah, no.
It's complicated.
It's all complicated. So I was born in what is now Zimbabwe, but when I was born there, it was the British Crown Colony of Southern Rhodesia, which became Rhodesia, which became Zimbabwe. And then I was thrown out of there when I was 18, went to the United States, went to university, served 4 years in the United States Marine Corps, got a passport, American passport for that, and then went to work for the United Nations for 36 years as a peacekeeper, diplomat peacekeeper, not one of the guys with a gun, although I did carry a gun at times because peacekeeping is dangerous. Never had a home, so home is where the backpack.
First started talking, when I first met you, we were talking about you've been traveling for how many years now?
40.
In this 40 years of traveling, we know that so much has changed. We're both sitting here with like these little phones that do everything in our hands. Let's start off just giving us a little bit about some of your first journeys and how you arranged your first journeys. How that
in terms of travel, backpacking, and so on. So I went through Ireland in 1987, but really the first long journey was down through Greece and Turkey. It was interesting again because there was very little information, and of course there was no online, so it was basically guidebooks, but they were still few and far between. So the only information I had was historical, basically. I'd heard of Athens, I'd heard of Istanbul, but I had no idea where to stay, how to travel around these countries. There was almost nothing out there. So I flew into Athens and then had to ask at the airport, how do I get into town? And then, get into town and then you say, well, where can I stay? And, you go to the tourist office and they can point you in the right direction. But travel is the same thing. You have to ask at the hotel or the tourist office, how do I get, to Turkey? And what's there to see in between? Interest in history, so I wanted to see a little old city called Mycenae, which is in the Peloponnesus, which again you have to take a bus out to, and then another bus, and fairly difficult to see. It's much easier now because there are tours, but back in those days there was nothing. You just basically had to hitchhike. And then I got to Turkey. Finally ended up taking the boat to Santorini and then to Rhodes, and then there's a fast boat from Rhodes to Turkey. And back in those days, quite often I found in Santorini also, is the hotels/hostels would meet the boats or the buses.
And they would have like signs.
They'd have signs and say, hey, this is this hostel and, this is the fee and whatever. And by the way, I still found that, I went to East Ireland 3 years ago and they still have that system. You arrive at the airport and all the hotels are lined up at the airport with little signs saying, stay with us. But I found that all over Australia. But I got to Turkey, got off the boat. There was only one hostel in Marmaris, which was where we arrived, which is now much more of a tourist city than it was then. And so the guy took us back to the hostel, me and this Australian guy who was on the boat. And he said, where are you going to Turkey? I said, I have no idea. I'm going to Istanbul, and I want to see Troy. And that's all. And he pulled out a map of Turkey, and he drew a big circle right in the middle and wrote, YMG, you must go.
Oh, okay.
Which was a place called Cappadocia, which is now one of my favorite places in the world. But at that point, now it's extremely well known and very popular. But at that point, When I went there, it was quite empty, and there was no tourism. And that's the nature of it. Is the number of tourists in all of these places has increased phenomenally.
And was your family concerned about you traveling? Was it?
Well, again, I mean, because of the nature of my life of being, basically thrown out of Zimbabwe at the age of 18 and then having to go to the United States and so on and so forth.
And you went to the U.S. with your whole family?
No.
Did you just by yourself?
Just by myself.
Okay. And I'm sorry, but
Yep.
Was it they threw you out or they threw your whole family out?
They threw me out. I mean, eventually most of the family did leave. But, I mean, when Zimbabwe became majority rule and became Zimbabwe instead of Rhodesia, anybody who had served the former regime, so to speak, was told to leave in different periods. And, the more vulnerable you were, the faster you had to go, basically. So people who were in high positions of power were given, months, and those of us who had been, buck privates in the militia were given 48 hours. So I was given 48 hours to leave the country, made stateless, basically, fled to South Africa, which gave us 3 months to basically find someplace permanent. I mean, I kept in touch with my family, but of course it was much more difficult back in those days. Finding, doing an international call. I mean, it took me almost 3 months once I got to the United States to be able to talk to my parents. Just because, again, international calls were just so difficult. I had to arrange it through the university, and they had to call people and basically set up a special appointment at the post office, and I had to go to the post office, and they put me in somebody's office, basically, and then it took like 30 minutes for the call to go through. And it was expensive. It was expensive.
Quite expensive. Okay. And letters, how was the postal system?
Well, again, I mean...
What are we talking? How many days would it take for a letter to get?
3 weeks.
3 weeks.
Yeah.
Were you like a big postcard collector? Were you writing postcards to people?
I mean, I had a deal with my mother that she wanted a postcard from everywhere I went.
Okay.
And so I would try to, find one. And it's not, most places it was possible, but again, it was not that easy. You just couldn't, normally walk into a regional post office and say, I want to send this to South Africa, which is where my mother was, and because I hadn't heard of South Africa and had no idea what to talk about. So again, you had to go to the big city. You had to go to I remember in Mongolia, I had to go to Ulaanbaatar and spend 2 hours in 2 different lines trying to find the one person who knew what the correct postage was and, how much the stamps were and how it was supposed to be mailed. Again, I mean, communication back in those days was extremely difficult. But I mean, travel was much more difficult financially wise because, credit cards, were difficult. I mean, they were not, most cheap hotels definitely would not take them. If you wanted to use a credit card, you had to find, go and stay at the Sheraton or whatever, But that was, again, it was a much, much more difficult thing to travel long distance. But back in those days, again, that's the other huge change is that back in those days, the people who traveled were almost all travelers. We were traveling for, 2 months to a year to 2 years. Nowadays, it's the other way around. It's maybe 5 to 10% are that way. More in South America than in the rest of the world.
Okay.
But you won't, in Europe, you'll find almost nobody who's traveling for more than 2 weeks.
Nowadays, we have things like all these online ways to look up at a hotel and so forth. So what were some of the ways that you were finding your hotels back in the days? Well,
there were only 2 ways. There were, really 3. I mean, one, word of mouth. You would meet other travelers. Where are you coming from? Where did you stay? That was very common. 2 was guidebooks. There were guidebooks out there. The problem is the guidebooks would only come out every 4 or 5 years. And so unless you got a new one, would get out of date fairly fast. And the hostels generally do not last that long. And so, and the other problem was a hostel, once they got in the guidebook, they knew they had it set. And so they would let, the hostel go to shit, basically, and they would double their prices because they knew everybody would show up. I mean, I remember arriving in Foz do Iguaçu in Brazil one time, and there was one hostel listed in Lonely Planet, which was the main guidebook, and they were charging $30 a night U.S., which is obscene now, but it was totally obscene back then. And they were full because that's the only place it was listed. But the funny thing, people are sheep, and so next door was a 2-star hotel, very nice. $12 a night for a single room.
But everyone wanted to stay at the hostel.
Well, the problem is it was in the book. I mean, so it was half jokingly called the Bible. The only planet was called the Bible because everybody used it. Because if you went now Europe, there were a few options. South America, there were 2 options, but like Africa, most of Asia.
Traveler's Bible, I've also
yeah. There was really no other option. And then the third way again was traveling in some countries. Again, the hostels would meet the buses or whatever, and that happened in Australia. When I traveled around Australia in the early '90s, I mean, you'd get off the bus and there would be 6 hostels standing there with their signs up, and it was great. But I mean, it's not. Hostels were different because the people who were traveling were long distance travelers, and everybody was quite respectful of each other. And again, most people now are still respectful. But again, unfortunately now, especially in Europe, again, with people who travel for the weekend, they're not used to backpacking.
One of the things that's quite often happens when we're traveling is that we meet friends along the way. We meet people along the way that turn into friendships. Do you have anyone that you're still communicating with that you met years ago? But,
sometimes it's weird. I mean, one of the things, South America especially, but other places also, you meet the same people over and over and over. I mean, I was traveling through Asia in 2008, 2009, and I was I'm sure it's called a hostel in Kazakhstan in Almaty, and the only place to stay was this one university dormitory. The floor ladies were renting out one of the rooms to backpackers. And it was 4 beds, but it was never full. There were three at most 3 of us. And so there was a French guy staying there, and he was waiting for a visa to Mongolia. I was waiting for a visa to Uzbekistan. And so he and I hung out for a few days, and then we just part, and he's going east, I'm going south, and we never expect to see each other again. And then 6 weeks later, I'm in Xi'an in China, in central China, and I'm sitting there in the lounge, and here comes Gabriel, the same guy, walking in. Good to see you again. So he and I chatted for a while and spent the day together, and then we partied again. He was heading for Beijing, I was heading south. 4 months later, I'm in a hostel in Lahore in Pakistan, and here comes Gabriel again. So Sometimes you have those experiences where you see people over and over, and sometimes you...
Was there ever a time that you showed up in a town somewhere and there was just no hostels and no hotels?
Yeah. I mean, I was traveling through Russia, right after it became, free of the Soviet Union, and there was no infrastructure. There was nothing. And so every town was an adventure. So I arrived in this little place called Ulan-Ude, which is the capital of the Buryatin Republic, which is part of Siberia, far eastern Siberia. Unfortunately, in Russia, often the trains arrive in the middle of the night. So the train arrived at like 2 o'clock in the morning, and I was the only one getting off. As I was getting off, the station manager was turning off the lights because he wanted to go home, obviously. And I had no information about this place. I knew nothing about it. And so I walk up to him and I said, in my very bad Russian, где гостиница, where's the hotel? And he kind of looks at me like I'm crazy and says, нет гостиница, there's no hotels. And I'm kind of going, there's got to be somewhere to stay. And then he says, and he says, you go down this path through the woods for like 20 minutes and there's a hotel. And I'm kind of going, yeah. So 2 o'clock in the morning in Siberia in winter, I'm walking down this snow-covered path through the woods. And after 20 minutes, sure enough, there's a building there. And it looks like an office building. And it's dark. But as I get up to it, I notice that there's a guy sleeping, has dragged out a desk into the lobby and is sleeping on this desk. And the door's locked, so I start banging on the door. And finally, after 5 minutes, this guy gets up and wanders over and opens the door. And I go, Gostnitz? And he goes, yeah. Okay. So he puts me up and takes my information, takes my money, says you have the room 14. I go up to the room 14, walk in. It's a 4-room suite. I mean, it's got a bedroom, it's got a kitchen, it's got a living room, but it's been stripped. The only thing left is the bedside table. I mean, all the appliances have been stripped. Everything else has been stripped. So I'm checking in. It's 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm going to get some sleep. The phone rings. Again, this is back in the days when there was manual phones. Mm-hmm. And I have no idea who would call me, and obviously, I assume it's maybe the guy from the desk had forgot something, so I pick up the phone and do it down, and there's this very attractive female voice going, would you like some company tonight? In English. Oh. And I'm kind of going, yeah, the prostitutes will always find you. So I, no thank you, hung up. About 30 seconds later, it rings again. Different prostitute, no thank you, take the phone off the hook, and we go to sleep. And it turns out that the place was the former rest house for the Communist Party. And when the Communist Party was dismantled, when the Soviet Union went down, the staff basically just decided to make it a hotel. But they hadn't got around to putting up signs or anything like that,
Oh, okay.
And
Do you have a good border crossing story for us?
From Peru to Ecuador is normally a very easy crossing, very simple. My timing was impeccable. 1998, I was crossing from Peru to Ecuador. Back in those days, there was no through bus. So you had to take a bus to Tumbes in Peru, and then take a shuttle bus to the border, and then walk across the border to Huasquiles in Ecuador, and then take a bus onward. And so it's a night bus. I was taking the night bus up to the border. Supposed to arrive at 7 o'clock, woke up at 6:30, and the bus is not moving. And I said, we arrived? Nope, we're on the middle of a road somewhere. So I walk up to the driver, and I go, what's going on? And he goes, the road's blocked. They're demonstrating, which is not unusual in South America, but it's kind of okay. So I look out, but it's one of these hardcore demonstrations. They've got burning barrels. The guys have the bandanas. They've got rocks. So that as I'm watching, this truck tries to drive through, and it's just pelted with rocks and Molotov cocktails. The guys are throwing. And so I kind of this is fun. So I asked the driver. I said, is it possible for me to walk through? And he says, well, you can try. So I get my backpack, I waved to the demonstrators, and I said, can I walk by? And they said, well, you can run. So I run by the barrels, and I get in. But I've still got another 1.5 kilometers to go into Tumbes. So I walk into Tumbes, I get Tumbes. Now the minibuses aren't running because of the demonstrators. So it's 5 kilometers of the border, if I remember correctly. So I start walking because I don't really want to stay in Tumbes. And I start walking, and it's hot. It's dry. And finally, after about 3 kilometers, there's a taxi who comes by. He says, well, I can take you almost to the border. Okay, so taxi with this guy. He drops me off like 1 kilometer short. I start walking up, and the border at the time was a bridge over a river. And on this bridge, there's a battle. So the police, I think it was police or army, I'm not sure which one it was, full riot gear, water cannon, tear gas guns, and the demonstrators are out there again with the bandanas, throwing rocks, throwing Molotov cocktails. It's a battle,
Yes.
And I'm standing behind the police going, damn. I've been walking for 2 hours to get here, and I'm hot and tired, and I'm standing there, drop my backpack down, and kind of go, okay, what do I do now? And the commander of the police kind of looks around and sees me, and he's kind of obviously very puzzled as to what this weirdo is doing here. So he walks back to me, and he says, ¿Dónde? And I said, Ecuador. And ¿Es posible? And he says, un momento. So he walks back up to his vehicle, and he starts talking to the guys, and they're all smiling at me, which is kind of strange because they got their full helmets on. And then he gets on the radio, and he says something, and all the police, they stop firing. They all pull up their guns. They all step back, kind of going, okay, what the hell is going on? And then he pulls on a megaphone from his vehicle, and he steps in front of his police line, and he yells over the demonstrators, uno momento, por favor, uno turista para Ecuador. And I'm kind of going, no. And they stop throwing rocks. They stop throwing the Molotov cocktails. And he turns back to me, and he says, Senor. So I pick up my backpack, and I kind of go, you sure? And he goes, yeah. So I start walking. The policemen are kind of patting me on the back. How you doing? And I have to walk through no man's land. I'm dodging these burning Molotov cocktails, and and have a handkerchief in my face to stop the tear gas. And one of the demonstrators steps up, bandana and all, and shakes my hand. He goes, bienvenidos. And I get by them, and I hear the police commander going, okay, and they start up again.
Oh.
But yeah, obviously communication's a lot easier, finding out what's happening in the world. Part of the problem you had when you were traveling 30 years ago is you had no idea what you were walking into, especially if you're traveling through Africa or parts of Asia.
Wasn't that part of the adventure?
It was, but it's not always fun.
Okay.
I showed up in Central African Republic one time in the middle of the Civil War. And so, you're literally hiding in the airport as the bullets are flying by.
Okay.
Yeah, so that was, and there were a number of other occasions where you walk in and, again, even the Peru, Ecuador thing, but other, where things get rather tense rather fast. Or, why are you here? Because, there's a war on. Kind of like, well, nobody told me. And there was just no way to find out. That was the problem, in Europe, obviously, yes, but if you're traveling through Africa or Asia, there's no international news out there. Now there is, obviously. That's one big advantage, but that was a huge problem back in those days. As you said, it's part of the adventure to a certain extent, and it, obviously gave some stories, and not always good ones. But
and so 2 or 3 things that you're like, I missed the good old days.
I missed the individuality to a certain extent because, again, there were a lot less travelers. It's much harder to get away from the crowds now. I would go for months sometime without seeing another traveler. No, again, admittedly, I went some strange places, but still, now, but even traveling around South America, I'd go sometimes, days and weeks without seeing another traveler. Now it's almost impossible. That's something I definitely miss. And again, I just miss the culture, because again, back in the day, the people you did meet were hardcore, just like you. Now most people are kind of,
You obviously must love traveling. You've been doing it for 40 years.
Well, I joke with people that I hate traveling. I love being there, but I hate traveling. I hate the mechanics of getting from A to B.
Okay.
But I love being there. I enjoy seeing new things, or even old things, because things do change. You can't sit there. I don't think you can sit there and say, okay, I've been to Quito. I never need to go back, because obviously it's changed in 30 years. Places changed in 5 years. You go back someplace, and again, I went to the Balkans in 2006, and I had it to myself, and I went back in 2024, and it was packed. Same time here.
So going to see that change. 40 years traveling. How much more do you think you want to travel? Do you have an end date, or you're just going to keep going?
I joke with my son that when I get to the point where I can't travel anymore, his job is to find me wherever I'm in the world and shoot me.
Ooh, okay.
Because I don't know how to live without traveling. I've never owned or rented a house, an apartment. I've never paid utilities. So I have no idea how not to travel. I've been living out of a backpack, or almost exclusively backpack, for 40 years. And so I just don't know how to, again, and I still enjoy it. I'm 65. I'm still enjoying traveling. It keeps you young as far as I'm concerned. The oldest backpacker I ever met was 92, so I've still got a while to go. Well, I think the main thing, again, is be brave, but also be realistic. Again, there are Instagram people who say, oh yes, it's easy to go to Afghanistan. It's easy to go to Syria. No. One person made it. 5 people did not. In my job, I had to get people out sometimes who got trapped in these countries. Don't just say, because you've seen one story about our documentary, as these kids did, about, hey, I can go to Afghanistan, or I can go to Iraq, or I can go to Syria. Do some research. Be realistic. It's really cool to go different places, but there's a lot of places that no one goes that are totally safe.
With all the technology that's out there that's made traveling different, thought maybe what could be next? What do you predict for the future of travel?
Well, I think it's going, and I hate to say this, but I think it's dying in terms of backpacking. Again, I think more and more people are doing shorter trips. I think backpacking as a rule is dying. And I think it's going to die eventually, because again, it's just too easy to take 2-week trips. And obviously it's much harder as a human being, just because you have commitments of jobs and family and so on, to go and take 6 months, 9 months off for most people. Most people can't do that. And I understand that. It's not that easy.
You mentioned that you're 65 years old. For older travelers, any final words for them? Like, some people are like, okay, no, it's, look what you're doing. You're getting this for the young people. I've heard people say that.
Oh, I do. And I've had people go, what's wrong with you? Why are you still traveling? Shouldn't you be retiring somewhere? It's kind of like, I am retired somewhere. I'm retiring on the road. But no, again, I've met a number of older travelers. I think it depends on the person. I think that one of the things that sucks about getting old is your body starts going, and you have to be realistic about these things. I'm staying in less hostels, more single rooms, things like this, just because it's easier on my body and easier on other people to a certain extent. But I think anybody, again, as I said, I met a 92-year-old who was backpacking in Argentina a number of years ago, and she was doing fine. A couple today, actually, and I met them in Quito also in their 70s who are backpacking, for a month.
So basically, you're never too old.
No, I don't think you're ever too old. Age is in the mind. Again, as I tell people, my body feels 80, my mind feels 8.
Okay.
So I have, again, I don't think you're ever too old unless you think you are. If you think you're too old, then you're too old. But it's up to you. I think it's up to the person.
Thank you for sitting down with me, and good luck on the rest of your journey, your continuous journey.
My continuous journey, yes.
Okay.
Never stop.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of El Cafecito Travel Talks with Tony Lloyd. If you'd like to learn more about today's guest, check the podcast notes for links and information related to this episode. And if you have questions, stories, or topics you'd love us to explore in future episodes, feel free to reach out. Tony also helps independent travelers plan meaningful journeys throughout Central and South America, including cultural and community-based experiences. And if you'd like to support the podcast and help keep these conversations going, you'll find a contribution link in the podcast notes. Until next time, thank you for sharing a cafecito or tea with us, and safe travels wherever your journey may take you.